Good afternoon, everyone. We're so happy to have you join us here today. We are delighted that you're able to be with us for our virtual open house. Today is Saturday, November the 27th, and it's a beautiful day here in Ontario, and I hope it's glorious wherever all of you are coming in from. We have a great day ahead. We have three incredible faculty members with us. We will first have Anita Sauve, then we will have Catherine Bruner and Jacqueline Steinert. We are going to be doing approximately 40 minutes of lecture time, and then if you could hold your questions until the end, and we'll be happy to go through any questions. So this is our 25th year in operation. It's an absolute joy to be with all of you here today. And today is our open house celebrating and honoring our January 2022 semester coming up. So we have our full-time and part-time programs starting, and our orientation is on Monday, January the 10th, and first day of classes is on the 11th. So in between the lectures today, I will be on and be showing you a virtual tour of one of our campuses, because they all have a very similar layout. And then I'll be happy to take any questions you have about our program or courses or any other details that you would like. And we will also be giving out some amazing door prizes today. So we hope you can stick around. And very exciting. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Anita Sauve. Good afternoon. Hi, Anita.
Hi.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Papadopoulos. I'm the director of the Institute of Holistic Nutrition of both the in-class and online programs. Our first lecturer today is Anita Sauve on nutrition and health fundamentals. And the topic today is fats that heal, protect, and sustain optimal health. Anita Sauve holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the University of Toronto. She later attended IHN and graduated with first-class honors. She is passionately committed to empowering people with knowledge about what goes on their plates. She runs a busy and successful consulting practice where she works with clients on an individual basis to increase energy levels, decrease toxins, and improve digestion. She offers sensitivity testing using a whole food-based approach. She develops programs in support of any health concerns her clients may have. And some of the typical clients that Anita sees might come to see her for MS, IBS, cardiovascular disease, hormonal issues, and many other conditions. Anita's excellent communication skills are put to use in her teaching and public speaking engagements. She regularly creates and lectures for both corporate clients and public groups on many different nutritional topics. She is also an instructor at the Goodness Me chain of health food stores and at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition in-class and online programs. She teaches nutrition and health, the fundamentals, preventative healthcare, symptomatology 1 and 2, comparative diets, and nutrition through the lifespan. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you. That's a lot. That's a great introduction. Thanks, Elizabeth. So today we're going to talk about fats. We're going to go through what the different types of fats are, how they become damaged and bad fats, what's bad and what's good. One of the big issues in our society, really since the 1970s, is that there has been this recommendation to avoid all fat. Fat is bad for you. This is hands down one of the most misguided nutritional recommendations ever to come about. It came into play when some studies were done on rabbits, and they were trying to look at the connection between fats in our diet, dietary fats, and heart disease. And they fed these rabbits fat, saturated fat in particular, containing cholesterol. And all the rabbits got heart disease. Anybody see the flaw in this? So rabbits are vegan. Rabbits have no dietary mechanism for dealing with saturated fat in their diet. So it was really a flawed study, yet it has been used and cited as a reason for all of us to avoid too much fat and saturated fat in particular. And since the 70s, as a society, our consumption of fats has gone down. Go and look at the yogurt section in any supermarket, and I dare you to try and find more than a tiny little percentage of them that have any fat at all. We really have changed the way that we eat. And since that time, our fat consumption goes down, yet all the big diseases of society have gone up. Obesity has gone up, heart disease has gone up, cancer, diabetes, dementias, Alzheimer's, all of these have continued to increase despite the fact that reducing our fat intake was supposed to fix that. So I want to clear up today some misconceptions about fat. This is covered in our fundamentals course in quite a bit of detail. We spend 2.5 days or so just talking about fat. So today we're going to spend a short period of time, but I'm going to hit some of the key highlights here and go through them. And again, as Elizabeth said, if you just kind of hold your questions, I'll leave 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to go over those. So just a quick overview here. Fats are these molecules. They're composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. We get fats from both animal and plant sources. This is where some of the confusion has come in. The animal sources were, deemed bad, and the plant sources were deemed good, but it's far more complicated than that. Fats are a energy-rich source. So we have 9 calories per gram of fat as opposed to 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate or proteins. One of the big issues with fats has been whether or not it is saturated or unsaturated. And we hear those terms all the time, but what does it mean? So a saturated fat, and what I've pictured here in this diagram, we have a saturated fat pictured and we have an unsaturated fat pictured. So fats are all made of this carbon backbone. And attached to those carbons, we have hydrogen atoms. And then we have some side molecules on either end of the fatty acid. All fats, I should say, are composed of a variety of different types of fatty acids. So when we have fat in beef, when we have fat in an olive, there are going to be a variety of different types of fatty acids in those fats. So it's not as simple as saying, olive is unsaturated and the beef is saturated. But what do those terms even mean? So a saturated fat, as you can see in this diagram here, all of the carbons in that backbone chain of that fat are linked to hydrogen atoms twice. So each carbon is linked to 2 hydrogen atoms. All the saturated fatty acid means is that all of those carbons are linked to 2 hydrogens. They're fully saturated with hydrogen atoms. An unsaturated fat, on the other hand, has what we call a double bond, at least one. One double bond means it's a monounsaturated fat. 2 double bonds means it's a polyunsaturated. 2 or more means it's a polyunsaturated fat. So with an unsaturated fat, instead of linking to the hydrogen atom there, instead of linking to an extra hydrogen atom, those carbons have linked to themselves. So it's missing a couple of hydrogens, and we have this double bond created between the carbons. And that results in a bend in the molecule. This makes unsaturated fats more fluid. So food items that would have high amounts of unsaturated fatty acids in them will likely be more fluid at room temperature than a food that has lots of saturated fats, which are stable and solid. And it is a result of these double bonds that makes the fat more fluid. Think olive oil at room temperature is fluid, whereas beef at room temperature, the fat is solid. So just to recap here, fatty acid types, a saturated fat has no double bonds. It is fully saturated with hydrogen atoms. A monounsaturated fat has one double bond, and a polyunsaturated fat has more than one. That's all. It does not, those terms don't speak to whether or not any of those fats are good or bad or health supportive or degrade and detract from our health. It's much more complicated than that. These in and of their own states are neither good nor bad. So again, the saturated fats have maximum number of carbons. They are solid at room temperature because they pack together those fatty acids very tightly. Unsaturated fats have those double bonds along the chain, which make it not packed together tightly. So it becomes more fluid. Those bends in the saturated fatty acid make it spread out more. So unsaturated fats are typically liquid at room temperature, and we call them oils once we've taken them out of their originating food. So where do these get to be good or bad fats? Well, it is those double bonds in the fats that are really important to the quality of the fat, whether it is a fat that heals or a fat that kills, which is actually the title of a book, the textbook that we use to teach about fats in the fundamentals class. So those double bonds in the fats, they are easily damaged by exposure to light, heat, or air. So think about that for a second. That damage is called lipid peroxidation. And when we damage that double bond, we've taken what could have been a good health supportive fat and we've made it into something that causes damage to our bodies. Not only that, but we can have the production of something called a trans fat. You've all heard this term too. There is no safe amount of trans fats in our diet. The trans fats that are man-made, we take those fats, those polyunsaturated fats that have those double bonds, and under man-made conditions in a lab, we force it to act like a saturated fat. It becomes this trans fat. And those trans fats are really important. We'll go through some of the roles of fats in our bodies, but fats are really important for all of our cell membranes. And when we use a trans fat in that cell membrane, it's like sticking a key in a lock and breaking it off. The function does not happen. So how do we store fats? How do we move fats around the body? One of the main transport mechanisms for fats is something called a triglyceride. You may have had this tested if you go for your yearly physical. Your triglyceride levels are tested, your LDL levels are tested, your cholesterol levels are tested. These are all fat modes in the body. So a triglyceride is a glycerol molecule that has 3 fatty acids attached to it. And this is the body's preferred form of fat. It's the preferred form of moving fats around the body. It's our preferred storage form of fat. So all your little fat cells are filled with triglycerides. We also have phospholipids. So the phospholipid is a phosphate head, and it has these fatty acid tails. So what's pictured here is a saturated fat that we can see on the left here. It's very straight and solid because it's fully saturated with those hydrogen atoms. And then we have an unsaturated fat as well. And you can see that it causes a bend. And this is going to cause that fat to spread out a little bit in our cell membranes. So the main role of these 'phospholipids is as a component of our cell membranes. And when we look at our cell membranes, this is the picture of our cell membranes. We have, you can see all of these little red guys. These are the phospholipids, and we have this bilipid layer. So the phospholipids arrange on the outside of the cell membrane and the inside of the cell membrane, with their fatty acid tails towards the inside. That's because the phospholipid is water loving and the fatty acid tails are water fearing. So they naturally arrange in this way, which helps create this cell membrane. And if you think back to, this is about the importance of fats, right? If we think back to maybe grade 6 science, we were probably taught that the nucleus of the cell is the brain of the cell. And that's true, but it is the cell membrane that controls all the functions of the cell. It is what allows for things to enter the cell and leave the cell. So it's very important for all of our cell membranes to be created with good quality fat. We need both saturated and unsaturated fat in order to do that. What else do we need fats for in the body? What are the roles of fats? Because it is very important that we actually have adequate fat from a dietary perspective, and so important that our body can make most of the fats that we need. There are a couple that we have to absolutely get from diet. We'll talk about those in a minute. Those are the essential fats. So the roles of fats here. So the first one is fuel. We need fat for fuel. We burn it for fuel. Short chain and medium chain fatty acids can actually be taken straight out of the bloodstream and immediately used for fuel. And we get those from things like butter and coconut oil. We use fat as insulation. It protects our organs from physical shock or trauma. And we use fat to help regulate our temperature. You probably all know people who are incredibly thin, very poor, very, very low body fat percentage, and they have a very difficult time regulating body temperature. Very easily cold, for instance. We also need fats for all of the cell membranes. This is every single cell in your body. And in order to create those cell membranes, we need both the phospholipids and cholesterol as well. Cholesterol, that's right, it's an important component in our bodies. It has important functions. We also need fat for our brain. Every single brain cell has this layer of fat that's wrapped around the axon of the nerves in the brain, the central nervous system, called the myelin sheath. It's literally made out of fat. And you can kind of think of it like insulation on a wire. You know, we insulate wires so that the nervous signal goes down that wire appropriately and is not interrupted. Same thing with the myelin sheath. We need that myelin sheath on those nerve cells so that we have electrical transmission of the nervous cell function. The next thing we need fats for are hormones. Yeah, your thyroid hormone, your sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. All of these things are made from fats. In particular, they are derived from cholesterol, a particular type of fat, sterol. And then we need fats for body signaling. So we have all these little chemical messengers that work to create function in our body. And they're derived from fats. We call them prostaglandins. These prostaglandins can increase inflammation when necessary to help us heal from something. They can decrease inflammation when we're done with that, or when we're exposed to too much, environmental toxins. And if we don't have, in particular, good quality omega-6 and omega-3 fats, we can't make those prostaglandins. We can't make those signaling processes appropriately. So let's talk about the essential fatty acids for a second. Essential fatty acids do not get stored as fat. They don't make you fat. In fact, they can help with fat burning. They are a very important part of the cell membranes. They will be used in these fatty acid tails in the cell membranes. And they increase the fluidity of the cell membrane, which helps it function well. They don't aggregate, so they don't make solid stuff. They increase fluidity. So the essential fatty acids, and you may have heard these terms, are omega-3 and omega-6. These are particular types of long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, so they will have more than one double bond. And these fats, remember I said that we could make fats because they're so important to body function? These fats cannot be made in the body. They have to be gotten from our diet. We have to have good sources of dietary omega-3 and omega-6. This is why they're called essential. So the roles of these omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in the body, well, they help get oxygen into our cells. That's important for energy production. It is important for decreasing inflammation. They help with hemoglobin production. That's important for moving oxygen around our body for energy again. They're part of the cell membrane. We absolutely need them to have proper cell membrane function. They help with recovery from fatigue. Why is it that some people, when they go out for an hour-long jog, recover from that very quickly? Their muscles recover quickly, and other people need to take a nap. Essential fatty acids have a role to play in that. Essential fatty acids have a role to play in chronic fatigue syndrome. They help increase the conversion of lactic acid to water and carbon dioxide, helping those muscles from that hour-long jog help recover quickly with less stiffness and soreness. They are involved in cell division. This is how our cells replicate themselves, how we maintain youthfulness, how we repair and rebuild, how we grow. They're part of DNA. The genetic material in each and every one of our cells depends upon essential fats. And they are precursors to the prostaglandins, those short-lived hormones that can regulate fight or flight, rest and digest, increase inflammation, decrease inflammation. And they increase the electrical potential of the cell membrane, helping each cell work better. So some other key roles here: growth. EFAs, essential fatty acids, increase the rate of metabolic action in the body, and they're also very important for weight loss. Most people who want to lose weight have been told to avoid fat, or they're afraid of fat, thinking, I consume fat, it's going to make me fat. It's not so. We need those EFAs. They're important for cell division, for brain development, to help reduce learning disabilities, in particular, the derivatives of one of the omega-3 fatty acids. Another one you've probably heard of called DHA, this derivative of an omega-3, is incredibly important for proper brain function as children grow, but even prenatally, from prenatal all the way through to full brain development at 25 or 30 years old. In order to convert from the omega-6 or omega-3 into the prostaglandins, those chemical messengers, we need a variety of other nutrients too. We need B3, B6, vitamin C, magnesium, zinc. And when we talk about fats, we can't discount the topic of cholesterol. So this can be, and it is, a widely misunderstood molecule in the body. Cholesterol is this hard, waxy fat. It is the most abundant sterol in the body. It has been inappropriately maligned as the cause for heart disease. Our medical system almost solely focuses on cholesterol, when in fact, heart disease is a much more complex disease than just cholesterol levels. Cholesterol is a necessary, essential molecule in the body. In most people, about 70% of the body's cholesterol level is actually produced internally. Your liver makes it. And it makes it from sugars, fats, amino acids, or we can get it from food. About 30% comes from food. If you're a vegan, 100% of your cholesterol level comes from your food, or comes from your liver. And the production of cholesterol is so important that every single cell has the ability to make cholesterol in order to insert it into its cell membranes to help protect itself if it feels that that is necessary. So why do we need cholesterol? Well, first of all, it's important for cell membrane integrity. We have that bilipid layer with the phospholipid heads, the fatty acid tails. Cholesterol comes in and inserts itself in between there to stiffen up the cell membrane. Or it's taken out of there to make it more permeable, make it more flexible. That helps prevent dehydration of the cell and protect from toxins from externally entering the cell. Cholesterol is also an important part of bile, which is how we emulsify fats so that we can absorb them appropriately. And it's a precursor for a bunch of steroid hormones, the ones that I talked about earlier, things like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol. It is a precursor for vitamin D. Vitamin D status is so important to human health. People with very low vitamin D have huge immune system problems, which can result in catching every cold flu bug that goes around. People who've had poor outcomes from COVID, for instance, have very low vitamin D levels. It has anti-cancer properties. It helps protect us against that. So the production of vitamin D is a really important role of cholesterol. And if we lack antioxidants, cholesterol can actually work as an antioxidant as well. So cholesterol is moved around in the bloodstream in these lipoproteins. You may have had that physical done and your doctor tells you about the LDL levels. So the LDL is a low density lipoprotein. And this is, we move cholesterol around in that LDL. And if we have enough dietary fiber to bind to the bile in the body, it removes excess cholesterol in the stool. So the cholesterol is not the problem. For many people with high cholesterol levels, it might be the lack of dietary fiber that doesn't allow for removal. If there's no fiber, as it works its way through the gut, we simply reabsorb it. I want to get into talking about this. So we've talked about the importance of essential fats, the omega-6 and the omega-3. What types of fats do we want to get out of the diet? Absolutely, hands down, the most important thing to get out of the diet are the damaged fats. So I talked about the trans fats. There is no safe amount. So damaged fats are created by man. We are manipulating that fat. Hydrogenated fats are one of the worst ones that we can consume. The goal with hydrogenated fats is to take a cheap oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, safflower oil, and make it into a cheap spreadable food product. It increases shelf life for things. So many processed packaged foods that you will find on the grocery store shelves have hydrogenated fats in them. And how do we make a hydrogenated fat? Well, what they do is they take that oil, that polyunsaturated fat with the double bonds, and under pressure and in the presence of a metal catalyst, they force hydrogen atoms onto it. So now it acts like a saturated fat. But that process creates large amounts of trans fatty acids, which again are like breaking a key off in a lock. When we commercially process oils, this is another problem. So my example here is a sunflower seed oil. So you've all probably had the experience of eating a sunflower seed. We eat that sunflower seed, it tastes like a sunflower seed. We get the good sunflower seed oils, fats in that sunflower seed, the polyunsaturated fats that we get from plant food. When we press that sunflower seed, we extract the oil. They cook it, they extract the oil. It's a little bit damaged, but it's probably not too bad at that point. And it still tastes like a sunflower seed. When the fat is in its whole food form in the sunflower seed, it's protected because it has antioxidants like vitamin E in it. It's when we take it out that we have a problem. And remember, those fats are damaged by exposure to light, heat, and air. So in the commercial oil making, we go through a number of steps here. So we have that extraction, mechanically extracting the oil from the seed. We then refine it. Refining it increases its shelf life. We lose a bunch of nutrients in it that way as well. We bleach it so that it looks better. And now, when it's been exposed to the light, heat, and air in this manufacturing process, it starts to taste like a rancid sunflower seed. So now we deodorize it and take the taste out of it. Sunflower seed oil should taste like the sunflower seed. But if you've ever had it commercially processed, it doesn't taste like anything. It's just that slippery fat. Then they add preservatives. They help defoam it, winterize it. We have that shelf-stable fat. Or they continue to hydrogenate it. This is a damaged fat. This is the kind that degrades human health. This is the kind we want to get out of our diet. So I often talk to my clients about doing an oil change. Let's go through your cupboards. Let's take all the bad fats out and start including the good fats. So again, the trans fats, they misfit into cell membranes. They can clog our small blood vessels, greatly increasing our risk for heart disease. They decrease the energy currents required for life, heartbeat, nervous system function, cell division, mental function. They interfere with those important prostaglandins. They raise total cholesterol and LPA, which is a greater marker for heart disease than is total cholesterol. And they decrease immunity, they decrease fertility. So the trans fats we definitely want to get out. That commercially processed oil we want to get out of the diets. Essential fatty acids, on the other hand, as we saw, were so important to health. We need them for energy, oxygen, hemoglobin, membrane components. So where do we get them? Well, good sources of omega-6 are things like hemp oil, borage oil. We can have the whole food sources of omega-6. Eat the raw nuts and seeds. Flaxseed, hemp seeds, almonds. Omega-3, on the other hand, don't have as many good sources. So omega-3 comes from things like flax seeds, from algae oil. And we can get some of the derivatives of omega-3, the EPA, the DHA that's important, from fish oils. So some of the best fats to use for high temperature cooking, we want to use things like ghee. A saturated fat is very stable. It is less likely to be damaged because it doesn't have those double bonds. So exposure to heat, light, air, are not damaging them as much. They're very, very stable. So ghee is great. Butter is great. Lard, preferably the lard is from traditionally raised animals. The butter is from grass-fed cows, not commercially raised, where the fat is exposed to more toxins in their food supply. Coconut oil is another one that has a high amount of saturated fat in it and can be very good for cooking. Medium temperature cooking, we use things like avocado oil. It can take a pretty decent heat. Camelina oil is really interesting. It's an oil that has lots of omega-3 fatty acids, which typically you can't cook with. But because it also has huge amounts of vitamin E, it actually can take a higher heat. So that's a good one to get into the diet as we start to try and increase more of the omega-3s in our diet. And then for low temperature cooking, we can use things like olive oil. It's mostly monounsaturated fat, so it only has one double bond that can easily be damaged. Ones that we wouldn't use for cooking, but are really important in getting more omega-3 and omega-6 into the diet would be things like cold pressed flaxseed oil. Flax oil has very high amounts of omega-3. We can use things like, there's a product that I particularly like called Udo's oil, and he's put together an oil that is very high in omega-3. It's actually got twice as much omega-3 as it does omega-6. But it can be super helpful there too. And these are things that you would want to use for salads. I keep missing that. Or to, you know, drizzle on cooked foods. And it is absolutely important to start getting some of these good fats into our diet and getting rid of the poorly processed damaged fats. So no margarine, no commercially processed oils, just the cold pressed avocado, camelina, olive, flax, Udo's, and then use a good saturated fat that takes a high heat for cooking. And that really kind of wraps it up in a nutshell. What kinds of fats, and do that oil change. What kinds of fats do we want to get rid of? What kinds of fats do we want to include? Don't just get rid of all fats. We see brain misfunction. We see imbalances in normal function of every single cell when that happens. So thank you for listening today. And at this point, I will stop sharing and take some questions.
Thank you so much, Anita. That was a wonderful and thorough presentation.
I know it's a
lot. Yeah, that was fantastic. So if anyone has any questions for Anita, please feel free to just type them in the chat box. And Anita will be very happy to go through those with you.
Wow, and I thought with all that information, there's got to be a ton of questions. But people are shy.
Yeah, that means you were very thorough. So how about one question here from Peter? How about bran oil?
I can't say I'm a huge fan of bran oil for a number of reasons. The first is that it is most likely commercially processed, so it's been through that whole processing. The second is that it comes from wheat. And in North America, almost all wheat products are, or almost all wheat crops, I should say, are sprayed with glyphosate before we harvest. This increases yield. It also increases our exposure to toxicity. Many people have intolerances to wheat. So I'm not crazy. You mean rice bran? Again, with rice bran, it's likely a commercially processed fat.
Yeah, he's referring to rice bran.
Yeah, likely a commercially processed fat. And I still am not, it's not one that I have ever recommended to my clients. I think that there are far better options out there.
Okay, thank you. And since olive oil can take low heat, would it also be okay to use it at the temperature it is, such as on salad dressings?
Absolutely. Yes. Use the olive oil in salad dressings. It's fantastic. Cold, it has to be extra virgin only.
Absolutely. Yep. Now, someone here says, I'm on a vegan diet. I was advised not to use any fat at all, which is very surprising. We're not sure who would ever recommend that.
Nope.
So she says, I'm confused now, but hopefully through Anita's presentation, you can definitely have some more understanding on that. So anything for vegans? I mean, I know some vegans won't touch butter or ghee, but we have the coconut oil, the hemp.
And that's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can use coconut oil for a saturated higher heat, avocado oil, the flax, the hemp, there are lots of vegan sources of fats that are going to provide you with the omega-6 and the omega-3. In fact, they mostly come from vegan sources. Saturated fats that you need in your body can actually synthesize those. It can make them. So you can do fine on a vegan diet as far as fat intake goes, but don't decrease the amount of fat. One of the problems with a vegan diet and avoiding all fat is that by necessity means your carbohydrate intake goes way up and you are going to have issues with blood sugar control.
Absolutely. And then we have someone asking about fat for heart health. So they're saying, is fat bad for heart health? But you did illuminate that. But if you want to say a few more points about the benefits for heart health.
Yeah, so absolutely not. One of the big causes of heart problems, atherosclerosis, the development of plaque in the arteries, is inflammation. It is an inflammatory disease. When we don't have the omega-6 and the omega-3 from our diet that we need, we can't control that inflammation. And by avoiding fat with heart disease, even people who have already been diagnosed with heart disease, again, by necessity, if you avoid fat, carbohydrate content has to go up. And that means your insulin goes up, and insulin in and of itself is damaging to the arteries and is a great contributor to heart disease. So we don't want to avoid fat with heart disease. We just want the right types of fats. Get the protected omega-6 and omega-3 in particular.
Excellent. And what is a healthy range of fat per day?
It can vary greatly.
Yeah.
I have had clients who, as a percentage of their calories, consume maybe about 25% fat. And I've had others as a percentage up in the 70% fat range, and they've both been quite healthy. Mm-hmm. It is really about the quality of fat rather than how much you would consume. Now, having said that, don't, run out tomorrow and start consuming massive amounts of fat. If you're not used to it, it's going to cause a bit of gut disruption initially. You kind of work up.
Yeah. And even for specific diet approaches such as keto, I mean, that's a high diet, that's a high fat approach right there, specifically to keto though. Yeah.
And as long as you're doing keto from good quality fats, because there's a wrong way to do keto, then it can be a blood sugar controlling, diabetes reversing, inflammation reducing, brain helpful diet.
Yeah. Another question, have you ever tried mustard oil for cooking?
You know what? I haven't. I know that it is commonly used in Indian cuisine and some Asian cuisine. I haven't used it, so I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And butter. As far as they're asking about high heat. So medium to high heat, would that be okay?
Yeah, ghee will take a higher heat than butter because you've taken the milk solids out. And ghee is just pure fat.
Yeah.
Having said that, again, think about the quality of it. And with any fat, it doesn't really matter which, whether we're talking about butter, coconut oil, olive oil. a good rule of thumb of if you're cooking with it and it starts to smoke, you're damaging the fat.
Which is better, coconut oil refined? I think they're trying to say refined and or unrefined.
No, so with coconut oil, virgin coconut oil is the least refined. That's what you want. The more that we refine it, the more, remember, every fat in nature, so coconuts, has a number of different types of fatty acids in it. Coconut oil is not all saturated fat. It's got some polyunsaturated fat. So the more we refine it, the more likely we're damaging some of those double bonds in the polyunsaturated fats that are still in the coconut oil.
The individual who is referring to the vegan diet, she is saying she learned any type of oil is responsible for increasing inflammation, and she was getting her fats from actual seeds.
I hope that we have kind of addressed that throughout this. Yes, you can absolutely get good quality fats from nuts and seeds. That's great. In their whole food form, they are protected by things like vitamin E.
Oh boy, the questions are coming in fast and furious. We may only be able to take a few more, but continue, Anita.
But that doesn't mean that a good quality cold pressed flax oil is not something that you could use for salad dressing, or a good quality extra virgin olive oil you can't use. You can. You want to use it up by the smallest bottle possible. Put things in the fridge that will keep them longer, keep them, away from heat and light. That will keep them good longer, and use it up within a short time period, like weeks, 3 weeks.
Excellent. Yeah. And almond oil is, would you recommend that for cooking?
Potentially almond oil might be okay. It depends on the processing. So that's one of those things, you have to look and see, well, is it a cold pressed oil? Has it been commercially processed?
Okay, very good. One person here, they're currently using canola oil and or sunflower oil for making curries. What would you recommend to replace those?
Avocado is great. It doesn't have a lot in the way of taste. So if you're looking for a neutral tasting oil, avocado is fantastic. I love coconut oil because it tastes great, especially in curries, but that's just me. You can use avocado as a good substitute for that if you're looking for neutral taste.
Okay, very good. And pumpkin and walnut oil, are they good?
Yeah, again, potentially. If it's a cold pressed, if it says expeller press, cold press, something like that on the label, it's going to be better. The more processed, it's not really about the oil itself, but how it's processed. So the more processed it is, the more damaged it is.
How truly bad is vegetable and canola oils?
Truly bad.
Yes, with a capital T.
Not bad enough. Throw them out. Yeah, don't even give them away. Throw them out.
Great. Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you everyone for your amazing questions. Thank you, Anita, for being on with us here today. And that was a great presentation. We hope that you have come away with some really good tips for increasing positive and good fats into your diet. And Anita, we hope you have a blessed rest of your day. Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the open house.